these 7 energy cycles every chosen one goes through without knowing it? There's something happening in your life right now that you can't quite name. Maybe it feels like you're stuck. Maybe you keep repeating the same emotional patterns, running into the same types of people, facing the same inner battles over and over again. And no matter how much shadow work you do, how many affirmations you say, or how many spiritual books you devour, something still feels unfinished. That's not failure. That's not you doing it wrong. That's the nature of the energy cycles you were born into. And if you're a chosen one, someone whose soul came here to awaken and shift consciousness, then you are not moving in a straight line. You are moving in a spiral. A sacred energetic spiral made up of 7 invisible cycles that shape your entire journey. And most of us go through them without realizing it. That's the trap. That's the test. And that's why this message is coming to you now. Because once you see the cycles, everything changes.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first cycle is what I call the dormant fire. It's the phase before you awaken, the phase where you feel the weight of everything but can't name why. It's like your soul is screaming through a wall of cotton. You move through life doing what's expected, school, work, relationships, but something in you always feels off, like you're wearing someone else's skin. You might even succeed by society's standards, but it's hollow. You laugh, but it doesn't reach your bones. You cry, but it doesn't open anything. This is not depression. This is the soul's compression. The chosen one must be compressed before the spark can ignite. Your energy field is being condensed, pulled inward, prepared for ignition. But because you don't know what's happening, you often interpret it as something being wrong with you. That's the first illusion. And the moment you begin to question, the moment you ask, is this all there is? The second cycle begins. The initiation of collapse. This is the part where everything starts to fall apart. You lose the job, the relationship ends, you get sick, you feel like the rug is pulled from under your reality, and it is, because your old energetic identity is being dismantled, not to punish you, but to free you. You cannot carry the next version of your soul while still gripping the old one. And yet we resist. We try to fix what's breaking. We try to hold on to what's leaving. We don't realize that the collapse is not a curse. It's a portal, but only if we surrender to it. And here's the wild part. This cycle can happen multiple times because every time you level up, the false layers must burn again. So if you've felt like you've had multiple dark nights, that's why. You're not failing, you're cycling. Now we move into the third energy cycle, the void of nothingness. This is the most terrifying and sacred of them all. It's when the old has died but the new hasn't arrived yet. You feel empty, directionless, forgotten. You stop hearing your guides, the synchronicities pause. You feel like your connection to Source has gone radio silent. And you panic. You reach for anything to fill the space. New teachers, new courses, new rituals, but nothing sticks. Nothing works. Because in this phase, you're not meant to do, you're meant to be. You're meant to sit in the ashes and remember that your worth is not in your output. Your power is not in your clarity. Your divinity is not in your performance. This is the womb of the cosmos, the recalibration of your entire energetic field. And the question you must ask here is, can you still love yourself when you have nothing to offer anyone? Because if you can, the next cycle initiates with thunder, the reclamation of raw power. This is when the fire returns. But it's different now. It's not the fire of ambition, it's the fire of energy, pure, primal, unapologetic energy. You feel your intuition sharpen, your boundaries strengthen, your vision expand. You start saying no without guilt. You stop shrinking in rooms where you used to play small. Your body feels electric with untapped codes. Your body starts connecting with others, and you begin to realize that all the pain, all the silence, all the endings, they weren't punishments. They were activations. This is when you start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And your magnetism increases. People feel your shift. Some are drawn, some are repelled. Because now you're not digestible anymore. You're not easy to manipulate. You're sovereign. And that power leads directly into the fifth energy cycle, the test of reflection. Life starts mirroring your new frequency, but here's the catch. The mirror gets sharper. You no longer attract chaos from your wounds, you attract opportunities to prove your embodiment. Can you hold your truth when you're misunderstood? Can you stay soft without being weak? Can you walk away from what's almost aligned because you know exactly what you're here for? This is where many chosen ones sabotage themselves. They confuse the test for a detour. But every test is a mirror of your current signal. The universe doesn't test your words, it tests your vibration. And if you pass, something extraordinary begins. The overflow of transmission. You become a source, not just of healing or wisdom, but of remembrance. People begin to awaken just by being around you. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. You emanate. You don't share knowledge, you broadcast frequency. You become a living transmission of what it means to survive the fire and rise without bitterness. But here's the secret. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of your service. And service doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means walking as your full self so others can feel what's possible. And yet, even this isn't the final cycle. There's one more. One most never reach. One that unlocks your galactic memory, your soul's origin, your multi-dimensional remembrance. It's the cycle that brings you beyond healing, beyond awakening, into creation itself. And that's where we're going next. The Creator's Cycle. How the final energy phase unlocks your galactic blueprint and destroys the illusion of separation. So here we are, the seventh energy cycle, the one most people never reach, not because it's hidden, but because it's ignored. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels like nothing, like walking through a world you once fought to understand and suddenly seeing it for what it is, a reflection of your own consciousness. This is the Creator's Cycle. And once you enter it, you realize that every lesson you've learned, every pain you've endured, every activation you've received was never about becoming anything. It was about remembering that you always were everything. But the remembering doesn't happen in your mind. It happens in your field. You begin to sense something ancient awakening from within, not a past life, not a memory, but a frequency. one that doesn't belong to the earth alone, one that echoes from stars, from dimensions, from timelines that don't have names. You feel it in your bones, in your blood, in your breath. It's not dramatic, it's subtle, but it changes everything, because now you're not operating from survival or healing or even purpose. You're operating from source. This is when your identity dissolves, not in a painful way, but in a natural one. You no longer need to be the healer, the guide, the teacher, or even the chosen one. You don't need labels to validate your existence. You don't need to prove your power. You are the power. Not in a loud, performative way, but in a quiet, gravitational way. You walk into a room and the energy rearranges, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've become the field. This is where your galactic blueprint begins to activate, not as a story to tell others, but as a code to live. You remember that you didn't come here to awaken and then ascend. You came here to descend with awareness, to bring the divine into the human, to walk through this world as a multidimensional conduit of frequency. And that means you no longer react to life, you create it. You don't ask, "What should I do?" You ask, "What wants to move through me now?" You don't wait for signs, you become the sign. But this cycle comes with its own paradox. The more power you hold, the more invisible you become. Why? Because real power doesn't need attention. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't explain itself. It simply is. And in that invisibility, you discover something that most never allow themselves to feel: peace without needing a reason. You no longer need your life to look a certain way. You don't need your journey to be understood. You don't even need to be seen, because you've seen yourself fully, deeply, without distortion. And yet, this is also the point where the illusion of separation begins to unravel completely. You stop seeing others as other. Every person becomes a version of you in a different mask, playing out a different pattern in the holographic field. You stop trying to fix them. You stop trying to judge or change them. You just witness. And in that witnessing, you liberate. Because your presence no longer carries the vibration of control, it carries the vibration of cosmic allowance. You become the space where others remember themselves without being told who they should be. And then something truly wild happens. You stop being bound to linear time. You start noticing that what used to take years now takes days. What used to be hard now just is. You think of someone and they call. You speak of something and it appears. Not because you're manifesting in the old sense, but because you've synced your field with the greater truth. There is no separation between thought and form, between desire and creation, between you and everything else. At this stage, your life becomes art, not the kind you plan, but the kind that pours out of you. You paint with presence, you sculpt with silence, you speak with soul. Every action becomes a prayer. Every moment becomes a portal. You are no longer chasing enlightenment, you are enacting it, not by floating above the world, but by being fully inside it, grounded, aware, and awake in ways that defy language. But make no mistake, this doesn't make you perfect. You still feel, you still bleed, you still get triggered. But now you know how to witness it without becoming it. You don't bypass, you alchemize. And that's the difference between someone who is spiritual and someone who has fully entered the Creator's cycle. The spiritual one seeks, the Creator embodies. The spiritual one strives to become. The Creator remembers they already are. So now I have to ask you, not from a script, not from a place of performance, but from a place of real frequency. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for permission to be what you already are? What would happen if you stopped looking for your path and realized that you are the path? Because the truth is, most people spend their entire lives trying to align with something outside of themselves. But the chosen ones, the real ones, they don't align, they anchor. They don't follow the light, they become the light in motion. They don't run from the dark, they walk it like a sovereign flame. And when the final cycle activates, they don't ascend out of the world, they descend into it as awakened creators. And that's what we explore next. Walking as Source, how to live, lead, and love once you've completed the 7 energy cycles. Most people think the spiritual journey ends with awakening. They imagine some final moment of peace, clarity, or enlightenment, after which everything becomes easy. But if you've made it through the 7 energy cycles, you already know that awakening is not the end. It's the invitation. The moment you remember who you are is the moment you're asked to become it. Not in private, not just in meditation, but in the middle of the chaos, in the noise, in the mess of the human world. Walking as Source means that you don't just hold frequency when it's quiet, you hold it when it matters most, in conversations, in conflict, in grief, in love, in leadership. And that is where the real journey begins. Because now, you're not following a path, you are the path. And that changes everything. Your life stops being about fixing or achieving, it becomes about transmitting. You wake up every day and ask not, what should I do, but what wants to move through me today? And sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's stillness, sometimes it's fire. But it's always real. Authenticity becomes your only compass. Alignment becomes your only currency, and this creates a whole new challenge. Can you keep choosing your truth even when it costs you comfort, closeness, or control? Because walking as Source is not glamorous, it's not always graceful, it's not about being perfect, it's about being pure. Pure in your expression, pure in your presence, pure in your willingness to be so real that the world doesn't know what to do with you. And that's exactly the point. You didn't come here to fit in. You came here to fracture illusion, to be the frequency that disrupts false stability, to walk into a room and, without speaking, remind everyone that they've been asleep. And yet, this isn't about superiority, it's not about ego, it's about responsibility. When you walk as Source, you are constantly aware that every word, every thought, every action ripples. You are no longer unconscious in your impact. You don't get the luxury of pretending you're small. You know too much. You've felt too much, and now every moment becomes a choice. Will I contract back into what's familiar, or will I expand into what's real? Will I perform, or will I be? And in that choice, leadership is born, not the kind we're taught, not hierarchy, not control, not authority, but energetic leadership. You become the stabilizer in unstable fields, the mirror in distorted rooms, the calm in chaos. Not because you're trying to be strong, but because your nervous system has learned to hold truth like a mountain holds sky. You don't need to force. You don't need to convince. Your presence does the speaking. And in love, everything shifts. Because now you no longer look for someone to complete you. You look for someone who can meet you. Not because you need them, but because you choose them. You stop performing your value. You stop shrinking to be safe. You love from overflow, not emptiness. You desire from clarity, not fear. And because of that, you attract experiences that reflect your wholeness, not your wound. But here's the nuance. You will still be triggered. You will still be stretched. You will still be cracked open. Because love is not here to coddle you. Love is here to evolve you. And now you're ready for that. In community, things change too. You stop resonating with groups that are built on codependence, on spiritual bypassing, on collective avoidance. You crave spaces that are honest, raw, and unfiltered. Spaces where truth is prioritized over comfort, where people don't just talk about alignment, they live it. And if those spaces don't exist, you create them. Not out of ego, not to be a guru, but because your field naturally organizes energy. You don't have to lead, you just have to be, and others begin to align. That's the power of walking as source. But here's the most beautiful part. Life becomes simpler, not easier, but simpler. You don't get caught in overthinking, you don't obsess over outcomes. You move when it's time to move, you rest when it's time to rest. You listen, you respond, you trust. And that trust becomes your anchor. Because you've walked through every cycle, you've been emptied, you've been burned, you've been rebuilt, and now you trust yourself and the field so deeply that nothing shakes you for long. You may waver, but you never forget. You may fall, but you rise with precision. You move like someone who knows that their soul is not just in a body, it's running the whole show. And so now we arrive at the real question. What does your life look like when you stop trying to become source and realize you've been it all along? What happens when you stop waiting for signs and start being the sign? What happens when your leadership is so anchored in truth that you don't even need to be seen to be felt? This is not theory, this is not metaphor, this is the invitation, and most won't answer it. Because stepping into this level of embodiment means letting go of every identity that ever made you feel safe. It means walking with open hands, open heart, open field, and trusting that whatever comes, you can hold it. Not from force, but from frequency. So now we enter the final phase. Not a cycle, a state. One that emerges only when you've walked through every layer, every illusion, every fire, and come out the other side not as a survivor, but as a creator of worlds. The final shift, how to stabilize your frequency so reality bends around your truth. When everything has been stripped away, when your ego has softened, your masks have shattered, and your energy no longer seeks validation, what remains is something so rare, so powerful, that most people will never recognize it. Stillness. Not the kind that sits quietly in the corner, but the kind that radiates. The kind that doesn't move because it doesn't need to. The kind of stillness that creates gravity, that bends reality. You've heard that phrase before, reality bends to your vibration, but what does that actually mean when you embody it? It means you become so stabilized in your frequency, so anchored in your truth, that life can no longer run on default. It must respond to you, not your mind, not your desires, but the signal you're transmitting with every breath, every word, every silence. At this point, manifestation becomes effortless, not because you're trying to manifest, but because you've stopped generating interference. You've cleared the static. You've stopped sending mixed signals. You're no longer asking for one thing while believing another. You are what you want, not in a theoretical way, but in a cellular, energetic, embodied way. And so the field, which is always listening, always mirroring, has no choice but to respond. Reality isn't resisting you, it's reflecting you. And when you truly understand that, you stop chasing, you start tuning. This is the final shift. Not a dramatic awakening, not a mystical explosion, just a deep, unwavering inner alignment that no longer fluctuates based on your external conditions. You're no longer in reaction mode. You're not waiting for life to prove anything to you. You're simply being, and that beingness becomes a force, a broadcast, a stabilizing field that affects everything around you. People feel it, they don't always understand it, but they feel it. It disrupts illusions, it calms storms, it softens defenses, because its power comes from neutrality, not control. But this kind of frequency isn't maintained through discipline alone, it's maintained through devotion. Devotion to your truth, devotion to your integrity, devotion to listening to the subtle, quiet voice of your soul, even when your mind screams otherwise. Stabilizing your frequency means becoming radically honest. You know when you're leaking energy. You know when you're compromising. You know when you're outsourcing your power, and you choose again and again to return to your center. Not because you're afraid of being off track, but because you know now more than ever what it costs when you leave yourself. And that's the essence of this final phase. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be present, fully, deeply, consistently. You show up for yourself like a mountain shows up for the horizon, unmoved, unshaken, yet always evolving. You stop trying to be everything for everyone. You stop explaining your energy to people who aren't ready to feel it. You stop diluting your frequency to avoid discomfort, because you've learned that discomfort is often the first sign that truth is present, and you're no longer afraid of truth. You are it. So now the world begins to shift, not because you forced it to, but because you're finally holding the signal of what's real. You become a reference point for others, a mirror that doesn't distort. And the more you stabilize, the more the universe entrusts you with opportunities, resources, connections, wisdom. Not because you're lucky, but because you're ready. You've proven, not to the world, but to yourself, that you can hold it. And so I ask you one final time, what would your life look like if you stopped chasing alignment and started living as alignment itself? What becomes possible when you stop bending yourself to fit the world and allow the world to bend around your stabilized truth? This isn't the end of your journey, it's the beginning of your sovereign creation. You've walked the cycles, you've seen through the illusion, and now there's only one thing left to do: live it fully, unapologetically, as Source.